Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner, your co-host. Oh, what a beautiful day it is in Northeast Florida. It's so hot. How hot is it that it doesn't seem like what season is it? I thought it was winter, but it's not winter. What are we in the spring now?
Yeah,
Because
supposedly.
it sure seems like the summer to me, but I'm being silly. Such a beautiful evening for a very serious conversation. Dr. Kane, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
That might be all the best thing since it's not such a great looking gown behind that. I'll work out the bugs. We don't want to look. Just look at me. Shouldn't hold one monkey don't stop the show. Let me put it that way. So.
I got you. Well, we are pleased. And Tyrone, our behind the scenes guy, I can't call him that anymore because he's no longer behind the scenes. But how are you doing this evening, Tyrone?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you very much for asking, Miss Jocelyn.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, tonight we are so pleased to have these two wonderful ladies from Mothers Demand Action. I feel like I need a gavel. Mothers Demand Action. We're talking about gun violence, America's epidemic. How are you doing, Cheryl and Katie? I hope it's okay if I call you Cheryl and Katie.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for having us here.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I tell you what, it saddens me, ladies, as I know it does you, when we turn on the television and hear about someone walking into a store, a school, a a place where you're so vulnerable. I mean, I think about the people at the church even, right? You're at the most relaxed and vulnerable state. If you were out in a war area, you're expecting gunshots, right? You're expecting for someone to potentially shoot at you. But when you're in a church, when you're in a school, and you're in a grocery store, a movie theater, those are not places, even a hotel, those are not places that people expect, or at a concert. I'm just thinking of all the places, the mass shootings that have occurred in this country. Let's first start talking about Mothers Demand Action. Tell us about that organization, one of you.
I'll let Cheryl do this one.
And Katie's letting me do this because I've been with Moms Demand Action since very shortly after it was founded. So I've been at this for about 10 years. And we were founded by Shannon Watts, who sat down after the shooting of Sandy Hook, opened up her computer, and created a Facebook page. Our name was not Moms Demand Action at that time, but shortly after it, that's what its name came to be. And she had so much response, so many people who answered her and were ready to take action that it flourished across the country very quickly. And then we found ourselves quite often running into folks from the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. We were in the same places at the same time, advocating for the same things. And so the decision was made that we would join and become a part of Everytown for gun safety. And Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is known as the boots on the ground. We are the people who take action every day. We are volunteers. You know, a lot of times folks will say that that we've been paid by Michael Bloomberg, who runs Everytown, who's not runs, but who founded Everytown for Gun Safety. We're not paid. We do this, most of us, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our country, and just for the future. And because lives matter. It's as simple as that, because lives matter. No one has the right to take a gun and take away someone's life. It's as simple.
How did you get involved, though? What made you, why did you feel it was an important thing for you to be a part of? Was it just because you were fed up with what happened in Sandy Hook, or because something personally happened to you, or what?
Well, there were several reasons. Number one, I was a first grader in a Connecticut elementary school. So Sandy Hook hit me hard, but it hit me hard right after some of our dearest friends lost their son, not lost their son, but had their son taken with a gun. And you'll know the story. You've heard the story. It's the story of Jordan Davis. And my husband stood up for Ron and Lucy at their wedding. We've been friends with them for years, long before Jordan was even thought of. And that impacted me because, number one, it was shortly after Trayvon. It was not that long after Trayvon. And because at that time, I had 4 grandsons. Now, today I have 7 grandchildren, and 6 of them are boys. And so I could see the danger. I could see the danger to our young people, and especially our young Black men. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something to take action. And so at the same time, Lucy and I were on Facebook, and we're in other places, and just searching for a way that, because the other thing that I had done is I had told Lucy that Jordan's life mattered, and he was going to leave a legacy, and we were going to do something in his honor. And we found it was, at that point, it was 1 million moms against guns, or 1 million moms against gun control, something like that. And we found that organization at the same time. And Lucy and I, me in Jacksonville, Lucy in the Atlanta area, and we were calling back and forth. And we couldn't wait to tell each other about this organization. I had signed up on Facebook, but Lucy had been able to go to a meeting. Shortly after that, we didn't have, as today, we have local group leads. In those days, we had ambassadors. And shortly after that, I became the ambassador for Jacksonville and launched the Jacksonville group. And before that year, this was at the beginning of 2013. And before that year was out, I became the Florida chapter leader, helping to grow chapters all across the state.
So what kind of pushback, and this is for both of you, what kind of pushback do you receive from people when you are at rallies or at events, just speaking up and saying, we are just here because we want safe communities? Do you get pushback from people who are, I call them gun owners, or whatever you want to call them? I really call them gun toters, but when in fact they may be legal with carrying. Well, nowadays, our new law in Florida, you don't need a permit anymore. You can just, well, you won't, I guess, starting July 1. But for people who choose to have a gun, what type of pushback do you get from them about the work that you all are doing?
I'll take that one, because like Cheryl knows, we are out in the community all the time, tabling at events, having conversations. And I want to preface this, that many of our volunteers do own guns, and we don't want to take anyone's guns away. We just want what the majority of Americans want. That's responsible gun ownership, to keep kids from getting access to guns, to keep our community safe. So I find that when we're out in the community, most gun owners come to us wanting to talk, and we always, even though we may not agree on everything, we always come to terms and seem to circle up and want the same thing, is, like I said, the responsible gun ownership, keep kids safe, common sense laws. The majority of Americans want a background check on every gun sale. They want these common sense measures that will make America safer. So we do have the Second Amendment extremists that always want to debate when we see these mass tragedies. And at this point, that's not saving lives. If we're going to continue to debate somebody's rights over somebody else's rights, kids are going to keep dying, and that's counterproductive. We need to come together. We need to do everything we can to strengthen our gun laws. And as you said, just yesterday, our governor rolled back a decades-long safeguard in place to keep communities safer. And people can now carry, as of July 1st in Florida, a loaded gun in public without a background check or training. And I have to point out the hypocrisy here, because our governor has banned guns in his own campaign rallies because he knows that they don't make us safer. But he wants to put them out into our communities across Florida, like I said, without a background check or training. It's asinine. So I think we just need to keep having these conversations. And like I said, we do come we circle up and have those common goals for America going forward with those gun owners.
I have
People are so volatile. I'm sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
I want to give you a little story about that. I have lots of stories from over the 10 years because I've been involved, not just in Florida, but because of being the state chapter leader with things going on nationally. I'm also a national trainer. So I actually train our volunteers as they come in and train our leaders. But one of the things that came to me, one of the stories that I was told and the pictures that I had was of a volunteer who was doing who was tabling at a farmer's market. And she had her display out, and the display showed all the things that we were working towards. And a little ways away was a husband and a wife, and they were having a bit of a discussion. You know, I don't really want to see those people. I don't want to go over there. They're just trying to take our guns. And the wife said, well, just go over there and see what they're talking about. Go take a look. And he took a look at our display. And he said, that's what you're for? Where's the paper? Let me sign up right now.
Wow.
He was a gun owner, an avid gun owner, but he understood the need for just common sense rules, things that will keep all of us safe and still allow for gun usage. There's just the entire gun violence and gun violence prevention field is so varied and so huge. There is a space for everyone and for everything. We're not here to take away your guns, but we want to make sure our children and our communities are safe.
And how do you do that though? How do you do that though, Cheryl, as a person who is a gun owner? What do you tell them about, you know, what we can do? What are some things that can be done to make things safer, other than not roll back, as Katie said, not roll back 10 years of legislation?
Well, the biggest step and the first step is making sure that we have people, we have lawmakers, we have those making decisions who are people who understand this and are willing to make these choices. Currently, you know, we don't have that, especially in Florida, we do not have that. Moms Demand Action is a bipartisan organization, and we have supported both Democrats and Republicans, those who believe and will support the same things that we believe in and fight for. So we have those people there. But currently, and I have to put the fault on the people because they didn't come and vote. We know we have the numbers. If you talk to folks, we have the numbers. There are more of us than there are those who want to roll back these laws. But because not enough of us showed up on election day, guess who has the power to control it all? And so my emphasis for this year personally is to educate folks, to educate everyone on how this works and that numbers matter and that vote is vitally important to keeping our children safe. There are other things we do. We educate folks using our Be Smart for Kids program, which Katie heads up for us, is how we educate people on the things they can do at home and in their community to keep children safe. Because there are things we can do. Unintentional shootings are a horror in the lives of parents.
I'm going to interrupt really quick. Sorry, Cheryl. Jacksonville leads the state of Florida in unintentional shootings of minors at the moment. And that's a disgrace. We got to lock up our guns. Kids cannot be getting access to guns. So like Cheryl said, we have a Be Smart program, and it's an education campaign for adults, reminding them to lock up their firearms in their vehicles, in their homes, to make sure kids don't access them. And also so they don't get stolen out of vehicles, which we know happens all the time. And those guns go on to be used in so many bad ways. So we go, like we said, Cheryl, we go out into the community, we hand out gun locks. I was literally just at our school board meeting. We held a rally. We had rallies across the state of Florida today to push on our lawmakers to take action and to push back on this permitless carry. And Warren Jones, bless this man on our school board member, he gave one of our volunteers a box of gun locks that he wants us to use in our community because he knows we do this work. So there's many things that we can do. And like Cheryl said, we have to show up at the ballot box. We have to stop voting for lawmakers who roll back our laws or who refuse to take action, especially in the wake of these mass shootings. And we need to vote for people who don't put campaign donations from the gun lobby over the lives of their constituents, Floridians and Americans. It's shameful.
You know, I can see where actually unintentional shootings are going to rise sharply. I could be proven wrong, but they're about to rise sharply because at least before you had to have a license to carry a concealed weapon, you had a pledge of responsibility for this, that, or the other. You know, you couldn't smoke a joint and have a gun in your hand at the same time, you know, but now Florida got is marijuana laws and it has is permitless carry gun laws. And, you know, one of the things that happen when people use marijuana, and I'm not bashing marijuana because it has its purposes, but people do not remember certain things. They are not focused on the things that they need to be focused on. So I can see someone with carrying a gun come in the house lit and put it aside, and only for the kids or whomever to come along and
we know.
I have a question here that I like to ask.
Sure.
And as I've listened to both you ladies, the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is, how has the situation gotten this far miscommunicated? When you listen to what it is you are advocating, any person of right mind, gun carrier or not, finds it makes sense. So if that be the case, then what has happened that made the communication of the true issue this far skewed?
I'm gonna use one word before you do politics. The gun lobby, the people that are profiting from selling guns, of course, they don't want a clear understanding of what it all means. That's their profit. That's where they make their monies. So the NRA and others that are taking and misconstruing, I guess, for lack of a better word, misconstruing the efforts that these ladies are putting forth in terms of educating the community. They doing that what do they call it? The beltway dance or whatever they call it, where playing with politics, and because they want their. I'm looking at the dog.
It was Buck.
I guess she got a dog too, because she looked back and see.
She does. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, yeah, I think it's just, it's how they do things. The gun lobbyists, they want to confuse the message and misconstrue what these ladies are trying to present in this truest sense to the citizens of Florida. I'll let them answer, but
I'll say something quickly and turn it to Cheryl, but I hear you, and that's exactly it. It's fear tactics and the gun lobby's extreme interpretation of the Second Amendment to drive gun sales. And at this point, we are at a crisis level because we have more guns in America than we have humans. So we have gotten ourselves here due to people putting money over over our lives. So Cheryl, I want to let you weigh in.
Absolutely. But what I want to tell you is that when we first started this, well, let me tell you a little bit something about what the NRA does. You know, for many years, the NRA is not quite as powerful today as it was before, but it still has some power, but it's not as powerful as it was when I first started. When I first started, they had millions of people that they could send one message to, and those folks would get on the phone and they would call their legislators, not once, but they would call them sometimes 2-3 times a day, 2-3 times a week, but they would call and keep calling. And when I first started, I had to beg people to make a phone call to their legislators. In fact, one young man I talked to on the phone, he said to me, I can't do that. It's like, why not? You very much have the right to call these lawmakers and tell them what you want them to do. They work for you. And and that was one of the most difficult things for me to learn how to do. Believe it or not, with all this talking that I'm doing, I really am a fairly shy person. But Katie knows, once you get me talking about guns and talking about lives, you know, that goes out the window, because our children they're just incredibly precious, important, and they're a resource we can't afford to keep throwing away.
You know, years ago, I'm sorry, when you were talking, I was reminded of something I learned about when we were talking about, it was from a series, Unnatural Causes and Place Matters, and really looking at the social determinants of health. And in one of the conversations, someone mentioned a study that was happening in California where children were asked, how old do you think you'll grow up to be? And none of them thought that they would grow up to live beyond 21. And so to have that basic conversation, if people would have that conversation and just randomly ask your children, you know, even if you have to disclose how old you are, do you think you'll live as long as me? Or if not, how old do you think you'll live to be? You might be surprised, and then further the conversation and say, why do you feel that way? And you might be surprised that they say because of gun violence or other traumatic circumstances that are happening in their life. Excuse me. If to our viewers, if you have a question for our guests, please give us a call at 888-669-1280 or post a question and our technology guy will get that up. But the one pushback that I wanted to say to you all, because I got it when I worked at the health department, we had a gun lock safety program where we gave out gun locks. And the pushback that we heard often is, well, if I lock my gun up and the bad guy breaks in my house, then I won't have access to it. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'd like to point out to folks this. That gun lock takes just a few seconds for you to unlock it. It only takes a few seconds. And in those few seconds, you might save the life of someone you love. Do you know how many stories there are of folks who shot their own loved ones? In the Jacksonville area, there was a story a few years ago of a mom who had sent her children to stay with grandma, and they were so worried about their neighborhood. Grandma kept a gun in her drawer next to the bed, and all of the children slept with grandma. In the middle of the night, one of the little guys got up to go to the bathroom, and he was coming back to get back in bed. Grandma never realized that he had left, and she took the gun and shot him. There's the police officer whose daughter had snuck out at night. She snuck out to hang out with her friends, and dad gets up at 4 a.m. to go to work, and here's daughters sneaking back into the house at 4 a.m. Dad is a police officer. You think, he knows what he's doing with the firearm. He pulled out that gun and he shot his daughter. There's story after story after story. And I tell people all the time, and I know this is not included in the Be Smart training that we provide, but for me, it was just plain common sense. Those few seconds that it takes you to unlock that gun gives you a few seconds to realize who it is you're getting ready to shoot. So it's as much a safety issue, and that's my background. I'm an environmental health and safety person. My job, professional, that's my job, was to keep people safe. I mostly worked in the manufacturing field, but that was my job, was to keep folks safe. And I know the value of prevention over fixing something later. Let's prevent it in the first place. Take those few extra steps right now to stop it before you get started. But that's what I tell people. It's just a few seconds. Not only that, what we advocate in Be Smart are the same rules that a number of gun organizations, a number of organizations that gun owners belong to, and they teach and train their people to keep their guns in one location locked and keep their ammunition in a separate location locked. And then, so when it's time to fire, you have to get both of them. But the other thing I have to tell you is, we think we have to have all of this right at hand. But let me tell you, Germany doesn't have any less in the way of crime. They have people who are breaking in and doing things, but they have such gun laws. And I know because my cousin lives there. They have such gun laws. It's going to be very rare that you're going to ever see anything like that. And if you look at the statistics, and Moms Demand Action in every town for gun safety, we are a data-driven organization. The things we do are not things that somebody thought or somebody felt or something along that line. We look at the numbers. And we look at the numbers so that we know. And we know that this country, if you take a look at the graph that shows shootings in the rest of the world that are comparable to our country and what we have here, you would be ashamed. It is huge.
Well, I mean, I hear that, and I come from, as I was talking to Cheryl at the beginning of the show when we was doing the debriefing and everything, I come from a different background with regards to an understanding of gun ownership, and having been taught from a little child the responsibility of owning a gun, have been taught the fact that a gun is not a toy. It's not to be played or handled unless done so appropriately. I was taken out to the field and I was taught to shoot and to handle a gun. But one of the things that came up, as you were saying, and I want to make it clear that I'm all on board. I believe 100% in what you're saying, but there are challenges in the circumstances. I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, and I have had to defend myself and property multiple times with a gun. And when you say, or when I hear you say 2, 3, 4 seconds, whatever, is a time to give you the ability to reason and make sure what you're doing. What goes through my mind is that was enough time for me to be shot. When you're in those circumstances, in the midst of those circumstances, it is truly training and understanding that allows you to be able to manage that situation clearly. We were taught with our guns, you should always have your gun and your ammunition. You should have your gun loaded. But the ideal and the concept of having them in 2 different places, I wasn't taught that one. It's by my bedside. My clip was right by it, and I could pick it up and clip in, and I was ready to protect.
I think that highlights the differences starts to highlight the differences in culture, to be quite frank with you, in terms of, yeah, because I grew up in the hood, more or less, in Fort Lauderdale, where you had to be concerned about people breaking in, much like what you're saying, Tyrone. One of the things that we had a problem with was, I remember my young brother, I'm thinking he was about 4 years old at the time. My dad had a 38 sitting on the bedside, and my mom woke up in the middle of the night, and he'd have picked it up, and he was pointing the 38 to her head, trying to pull the trigger. Okay, because he's watching Roy Rogers or whomever, and he didn't, I mean, when Yosemite Sam gets shots, he get up. Kids,
I understand.
Type of mentality, it never dies. But it highlights the culture differences that we're seeing, I think, as well, because what we tend to see, the neighborhood I'm in right now and the house that I'm in right now, got cameras all over the place. I get a whole lot of warning for people to come in. So it makes no sense for me to necessarily have a loaded gun ready to fire and shoot that quickly, because I get warnings before they come in. But if I'm over there and not to pick at any particular neighborhood in Jacksonville, but over off the east side, I may not have the ability or the monies to own or to get cameras or whatever it is that can give me a prior warning to people outside snooping around, except the old infamous dog, which you keep the dog outside, because that was our warning signal back in my neighborhood, in the urban area. That was our warning signal. Dogs start barking, you get up, you pick up your gun, and you get ready to see who it is he or she is barking at. So I think we really highlighting a whole lot of cultural and class differences in terms of what we see. And it's not an easy task. The overwhelmingly, you probably will have more mistakes, I guess, in terms of gun utilization for friendly folk than, people that might harm you with relationship to being in your household.
May I say something really quickly? And I hear exactly what you're saying, because there are communities here, especially in Jacksonville, that are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. And not only do we need to address our laws, we need to address the root causes and underlying cause of gun violence and why that is the case in different communities. It's not okay. And we advocate for community violence intervention and prevention programs. Like Cheryl said, we need to get to that early prevention and not be reactive. And so I want to point something out quickly. Our state is one of 6 that did not accept federal funding. I think upwards to $15 million that would have been used for these community violence intervention programs under this Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed at the federal level this summer. So that's another thing that's just shameful. We are seeing a super majority in Tallahassee really ram through some really reckless, extreme legislation and make really reckless and extreme decisions, including this one. So, and that's what we do. We do go out and support those organizations, those boots on the ground people that are working in those communities to address the root causes of gun violence and stop it before it starts. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Community outreach is a major component of what we are doing. It's one of the things that we learned from our data. A few years ago, we learned through our data. And we started out, Moms Demand Action started out thinking that we can do this. We can help bring in enough people, and we can do this, and we can train people, and we can get with legislators and help people to learn all this stuff, until the data showed us that there are already people out there doing this, and they are much better than we are. And so it's up to us now to partner with these groups, to partner with these organizations, and give them the extra set of hands that they need to make this happen. And that's what we're doing all over the country, is that we are partnering with all kinds of organizations that are actually making a difference and reducing the gun violence. They go out and they find out the neatest thing. They find out about someone who's been shot and who's in the hospital, and they find out those circumstances, and then they go back to those communities and find the other side of that story, and then they work to reduce, because there's a lot of, well, so and so was shot, so I'm going to go shoot somebody else, or this one was, this happened to this family, I'm going to go get their family. And we have people now who've lived those lives, who have been in those areas, and they go out and stop this. And everywhere that I have seen, all of the data that I have seen shows that they do great work and they reduce the amount of gun violence.
I gotta say this, and I'm not trying to hold the conversation, but I'm really concerned about this new state law just to pose to police actions in our community. Now that anybody can carry a gun, okay, does that present an opportunity or an abuse or misuse of people able to carry weapons, that some segments of society will be shot more than other segments of society?
Oh, absolutely.
We're doing traffic stops and other stuff like that. Or, for somebody who's walking in the convenience store, some guy bumps up against them and, they want respect. And there may be color differences in this case, a scenario. One person shoots the other one and say, hey, I was threatened. Granted, I might be carrying a gun. I didn't reach for it. I didn't approach it. But then they wind up making light, how the news media or people trying to defend their positions on things, making light of the fact that, well, he had a gun. And so the police had every right to shoot him. But I'm carrying a gun legally. And because I'm of a particular persuasion, I'm more likely to be shot than others of different persuasion. So that's one of the things that really bothers me about this new gun law.
Well, I think that goes to what Miss Katie was saying. We have to truly look at the root cause. And as I did our research, we looked into it, I was surprised at the root cause to gun violence. And some of them are income inequalities, poverty, underfunded public housing, under-resourcing of public services, underperforming schools, lack of opportunity and perception of homelessness, ease in access of firearms to risky people. Prior to preparation for this here, I would not have contributed any one of those items to the root cause of gun violence. I think this highlights the need and power for the education that these ladies have been talking about since we started this podcast, and their efforts to reach out to individuals and to inform them. We need to have a solution for informing and educating individuals that will then prompt, push, and promote them to go out and vote on behalf of this very important issue.
And that was not put in this law, this bill that just passed. Education part was not put in the bill.
Oh, no, it was removed.
That's a tragedy in itself.
It was removed. Absolutely, it was removed. And those are the points that people make. But what a lot of folks do not realize is that, first of all, law enforcement knows this is going to put their lives at more risk. But they also know they're no longer allowed to ask about that gun. So if they've pulled someone over to a traffic stop and there's a firearm laying in the back seat, all they can say is, "Have a good day, sir," and send them on their way. They're not allowed to ask them.
It's absolutely tying the hands of our law enforcement. And like Cheryl said, it's it's going to make the boots on the ground responding officers' jobs way more deadly. And I have to point this out. Permitless carry is going to have a deadly intersection with our state's shoot first, stand your ground law, which disproportionately impacts people of color. And so it terrifies me of what this means for the future of Florida.
That was my point exactly. It's terrifying what it presents to the big black guy, especially, that seems to be threatening to. I got a nephew. I actually got a grandson. So like 14, 15. He's probably standing about 6 foot, beard, just a older looking young man, but he's only 15. And so I can only imagine the threat that he may be to some people whom are afraid already of the proverbial big black guy.
Well, we haven't talked about the talk that African Americans, communities of color have with their children because of the fear. I know the same thing in my family. My brothers had to have the talk with their children, primarily sons, cousins, friends. Everybody in my community have the talk to warn them. So Katie, when you said that, I am just so fearful about what will happen. Again, you think about we talk about, we've had a conversation about human trafficking. So if a cop stops someone, a person is in the front seat who's seemingly terrified. The cop sees the gun in the back or someone holding a gun. It could be pointed at that person's, in the front of them. So it's just so many scenarios that are so frightening and horrible to think about that could be played out. And I hope that our listeners who are listening to this conversation, who might be law-abiding gun owners, we're not talking about you. We're talking about the bad guys who are looking for that gun that you mistakenly leave in your unlocked car at night. They're going around. It's happened at my house. I saw on my camera where somebody was playing with the car door, trying to get in with hopes of the locks, the doors being unlocked. But you mentioned, Cheryl, a couple of times that you all follow the statistics. So what are the statistics saying in Jacksonville or in Florida even about the number of, and you mentioned the unintentional, I think it was an unintentional shootings, or what statistics have you looked at lately that have been rather alarming to you? I'll just put it like that, because I'm sure you look at a lot of data. Anything stand out for you or Katie?
Actually, for me, they all, every time I look at anything, I am just absolutely horrified. And the misinformation, oh my goodness, the misinformation. We have been accused quite often of incorrect statistics. There are folks right now who are challenging the latest statistic that firearms, that guns are the number one killer of our children. It is the number one cause of death for children. And I watched this happen. I watched this happen over the last 10 years. And I have to tell you, I know that the data is skewed in a lot of places. And one of the ways I know this is just as the Be Smart program was being created and was being sent out, one of the things that was done is we took the statistics from all of those trusted areas, from law enforcement, from the department of, all of the different various departments of law enforcement, and we took their statistics as being the correct information. We accepted that, and we worked with those numbers for just a few months until we realized there was something wrong with these numbers. And we simply went to media records and looked at all of the shootings that were reported in regular media. It more than doubled what law enforcement was telling us, because it wasn't being reported. It wasn't being recorded. Your data is only as good You know, they talk about garbage in and garbage out. Your data is only good at what's actually being reported. And we found that they had the wrong information. And when they put that in there, when I was chapter leader and Florida became one of the top 3 states for unintentional shootings, I virtually had a fit. I just could not believe that we were putting our children at risk like this for things that were so simple to take care of.
Well,
Yeah, I
Cheryl,
know we used to always look at, hold on a
miss-
second, Dr. Kane. Hold on a second. One point I wanted to make, and then I want to give the, Tyrone, if you can put the number up again. One point I wanted to make, the data that we always looked at the health department when I was there is hospital data, because the number of people that end up in the emergency room, I was just thinking, gosh, it would have been great to have a trauma physician on to talk about the number of people who show up at the hospital in the ER who've been shot. Yeah, from gunshot wounds. If you are listening and you'd like to ask our guests a civilized question, then I say that with all due respect, because this is a conversation that unfortunately it makes people uncomfortable about. And we're just trying to have a civilized conversation about gun violence. If you have a comment or question to ask, call in 888-669-1280. Again, we just ask that you be respectful of our co-hosts as well as our guests. Go ahead, Dr. Kane.
I was just going to ask Cheryl, there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation when you start looking at lobbyists and other people that are pro-gun, So I just want to point out misinformation versus disinformation, with the intent of disinformation being a deliberate intent of or malicious intent or content to persuade one's opinion, yada 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 yada. Misinformation is, I'm just stupid, I don't know any better.
Yeah. No, we're going to go back and check our numbers. I promise you, we're going to check our numbers.
I have some statistics since going back to Jocelyn, and I pulled it before going on here, and this is jarring. And like Cheryl said, each and every year it goes up doing this work, and it's very difficult to watch. But in the United States, the rate of gun deaths increased 33% from 2011 to 2020. And during that same period, the rate of gun suicides increased 12% and gun homicides increased 70%. So that just shows over the years how this is happening. And I will point out that children, my boys' age, 12 and 14, they have the highest increase in gun suicide than any other age demographic. And that's terrifying. And back to locking up your firearms in the home. A split-second decision can turn into a fatal decision, an impulsive decision by a teenager. And also sending your child into somebody's home just because you might be responsible, or teaching your kids to be responsible around guns. You aren't so sure about those other homes your kids are going into. So you always need to ask about the presence of firearms before going into other homes or sending your children off. So sorry, thank you for allowing me just to drop those statistics in.
Yeah, and I want to follow up, Katie, with some more statistics that I found from the Centers for Disease Control website. Between 2019 and 2020, the firearm homicide rate increased about 35%, and the firearm suicide rate remained high. The largest increase in firearm homicides was among Black people, 39%. The largest increase in firearm suicide was among American Indian and Alaska Native people, 42%.
Oh.
In 2020, counties with the highest poverty level had firearm homicide rates 4.5 times as high, and firearm suicide rates 1.3 times as high as counties with the lowest poverty rate. Now let's digest that for a moment. Counties with, or neighborhoods with the highest poverty rates. Those are the people that are showing up. Yeah, maybe that's not your neighborhood where you live, but those are the people, to all the business owners, that are showing up at your jobs, right? Now they're going to be able to carry a gun. If somebody, God forbid, says the wrong thing, they're already stressed at the lifestyle that they're living at home. The not being able to figure out how to get their child fed, not figuring out how to get the money for medication. So, and then they come to work and somebody says something, all they have to do, they don't have to go out to the car. They don't have to go to the glove compartment anymore in Florida. In July, they can just go and pull it out of their briefcase or their lunch bag, unless the job says you can't bring it in the building, right? So there are just so many what ifs in these circumstances. So when we talk about the things that we need to think about, there are people who are struggling, guys. There are people who are struggling, and they are, emotionally stressed out. So we're talking about stress and trauma. And now those folks are going to be able to get their hands on a gun that maybe, somebody gave them or they found or whatever the case may be. And all of that, those are just factors that, elected officials just are not thinking about. Maybe you are in a nice home, no stress or whatever in your neighborhood. But trust me, these are the folks that may end up showing up at your jobs, and you're not paying a living wage for those individuals. So they're struggling. So I just had to get that off of my chest.
Oh, let me help you understand a little more here. I tell people all the time, and we've heard this phrase before, but I do my best to live it. And that is that we are all of us in this together. Katie's smiling because she knows I say it all the time. We are all in this together. None of us is an island. None of us is going to get through this without some help somewhere, sometime from someone. So we're all in this together. And one of the things that happens with Moms Demand Action and those community partners you were talking about, those are some of the things we work on. The diaper banks, collecting food. We go out into the community to do actions with groups that are trying to alleviate some of these stresses, and some of these things are out there, and we're looking for more. So if you are an organization listening here and you are doing those things that are going to help solve gun violence, you reach out to us. We're looking for community partners. We're looking for organizations to join with us. We're not going to tell you what to do. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, because that's going to lead us to our goal. Because if we help the people with what they have, then we're going to be able to help to reduce some of those factors for gun violence. We did, there was an organization in Jacksonville, we collected, Katie will remember the name, we collected school supplies, and we provided school supplies. We do all kinds of activities as soon as we can find an organization that's doing something. We're going to reach out to you. Somebody's going to be there and say, how can we help you? So,
one of the things that does concern me is that at least in the previous gun concealed weapon, mental health was addressed. I don't think it's addressed with this one.
It's not, because background check's no longer required.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's eliminating the background check to conceal carry a loaded lethal gun in public. And they're arguing, well, you get a background check when you purchase a gun, but that's one of the biggest loopholes in our law, and Florida hasn't closed it. And you can purchase a gun from a private sale or online or gun show for the most part without a background check. So oftentimes that background check when applying for a concealed carry permit was the only background check people were getting. So we need to be very clear. So thank you for highlighting that.
I haven't checked this.
Imagine there are probably going to be more and more. There probably be a gun show a month in every city in Florida.
There already is that. There already is.
And by the way, we're nearing the end of, sorry to interrupt you, but we're nearing the end of our hour. And we knew, as Dr. Kane always says, we need longer than an hour. This is a conversation that the shy Cheryl, I don't know why she told us she was shy. She may be shy about everything else, but she's passionate.
She just missed the R and the L in her name.
But she is clearly passionate about this, but we like to give our guests an opportunity to share their final thoughts. Knowing that July 1 is going to happen regardless of what we might care about, What are your final thoughts, ladies, of what can people do to help make our communities safer, or any other final thoughts that you have? And I'll start with you, Cheryl.
Well, it begins with what I started with, is to vote. But the other thing that needs to happen is you need to contact your legislator. You need to contact your lawmaker. And if they're one that's making good choices, you need to pat them on the back and let them know to stay in the fight for us, not to be discouraged. And if they're not, you need to let them know, because they're not hearing from us. They're hearing from the other side. So we have to get engaged. We have to save these lives. I tell people all the time, the life you save may be yours or the one that belongs to someone you love. And you sitting on the sidelines is not going to make it happen.
Let the church say amen. Amen to that. Katie, what are your, Katie, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion?
I'm with Cheryl, and y'all, we have to show up at that ballot box first and foremost. And I know that these mass shootings wake us all up, and we want to do something, and we have to continue the conversation after this. We have to stay loud. This is not a moment, it's a movement. Many of us have been in this for many years. Many are survivors of gun violence, and they have been on the forefront of this fight for decades. And we have got to show up and support them, calling for change. Like I said, not in just these wakes of mass shootings, because we know more than 120 Americans are shot and killed every single day. Hundreds more are shot and wounded. This is a public health crisis. It's an epidemic, and we all have to get loud and stay loud. So, and please join us. Visit momsdemandaction.org to learn more about us and find events locally.
Thank you. 120 people a day. Wow.
It was 67 when I started 10 years ago. There were 67 lives taken with the gun when I started 10 years ago. And now that number is 120.
Wow.
And that's because as fast as we pass those good laws, they're right there waiting for us to turn them back. And we have to let them know that this is not going to happen anymore. We're not going to stand for it.
Because moms demand action.
Absolutely.
Tyrone, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the ladies for coming on and giving us a very candid look at the challenge that's set before us. And as I've said prior to and talk with them, I am a gun owner, gun toter, gun believer, but I also support the message that they're talking about, because what they're talking about is responsible ownership. I really like that both of them at one point in their conversation had said that they're not trying to take a person's gun. They even said some of them own guns. You know what I'm saying? So that's very important for our audience, our viewers, and our listeners to hear. This here organization, this group, Moms Actions, it's not about taking your guns. It's about making sure that, first of all, the individuals that have guns are of the status and stature and mental health to own a gun. All right. So the one thing that I wanted to say is, as I did research, the thing that was shocked me the most were those things that I mentioned as the root causes for gun violence. That is, to me, the most alarming piece. And what it says to me is that we all need to get involved. When Cheryl said that she had difficulty getting individuals to call, it bothers me, because why is it they don't have an issue getting people to call, and us or them who are on the side of good and right have an issue getting people to call? You can't sit on the sideline. You got to get involved. That's my thought.
Thank you, Tyrone. Dr. Kane, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
I think Tyrone hit the nail on the head. You can't sit on the sidelines and not get involved. One, if you want a safer household, safer neighborhood, safer city, safer country, you cannot. and the statistics were about where it's almost 40. That 120 times 365. That's almost 44,000 people a year reported. That's what you got to remember. Reported. But we already heard that the statistics were skewed in favor of not being reported for whatever reason it was. So it may be double that for all we know. But what we do know is 44,000 people a year are dying from the type of gun violence that we spoke to. I too would like to thank the ladies for bringing this on. I think this is a conversation that will be before the year is out. We definitely going to have to come back, because after July 1st, I just want to see what happens, because I expect some things to rocket in terms of the frequency of occurrence. And I can leave that. That's not something to be left to the imagination. I think people know exactly what it means. It's just a matter of time before once July 1st hit, that we're going to see an alarming number of unnecessary death as it relates to guns. So, and for those of you that are gun owners, I don't have a problem with you owning a gun. I just have a problem with you not being a responsible gun owner, if the shoe fits. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. We will look forward to bringing you back again after July 1st. Probably somewhere, I think we're going to get a good feel somewhere around September. That's just my guess. But we want to take a look again at the same subject matter later in the year. So thank you for coming on, and much appreciated.
Thank you for
tonight's discussion, thank you, Cheryl and Katie, for a great discussion. You made us really think about some things, and it just prompted me to think about, as we further the conversation about gun safety, is to have, as you put in your comment, survivors. Also, I'd like to even have a conversation, and Dr. Kane, for us to even invite maybe the folks who voted for this and felt that this legislation was important. Like, what prompted it is what I want to know. Why, of all the things that are happening in Florida, what prompted this legislation to rise to the top at this particular time in Florida? I would love to be able to get some elected officials from the Florida legislature to come and answer that question. But nonetheless, to our viewers, we hope that we shared some information, some insight. The show was not intended to change minds, but just to enlighten you, and knowing that regardless of where you live, what you do, what may or may not have happened to you, unfortunately, innocent lives are lost every day, as you heard from our guests, as far as gun violence is concerned. None of us want to be the victim. We don't want anyone in our family or our circle to be the victim. We cannot continue to stand by and think it's someone else's responsibility to do the right thing as far as our families, our children, our grandchildren, our loved ones, our grandparents, because people who've gotten shot, if you see the profile of them, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there are people who were in church. There are people who were at the grocery store. There are people who were in a movie theater, at a nightclub. There are so many places that these folks were innocently minding their business. God forbid, we don't want that to happen to any of us. Thank you for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. Again, thank you to our guests. Tune in next week as we have a discussion. Dr. Kane, would you like to enlighten our audience who our guest is going to be next week?
Well, next week we did invite the two mayoral candidates for Jacksonville to come on and speak to our audience. So far, we've only had one to confirm. I don't think you guys have to guess who that is. But Miss Deegan will be with us next week. We did again invite both candidates, and she readily accepted our guest. And so we are asking the audience to come with your questions, civil, as you say, Ms. Turner, civil questions and asking about the things that most concern you as a Jacksonvillian, Northeast Florida resident. And of course, gun violence is one of those questions. So
as it relates to health and healthcare, because
obviously
we can talk about, obviously we can talk about a lot of different things, but our focus for the show is going to be on health and healthcare.
Yes.
So
yes,
so thank you all again for tuning in. And if your friends missed tonight's discussion, it will be available on YouTube, and look for the Tonight Show so that you can view it again. Thank you, ladies, again, and good night.
YouTube and a host of other platforms. Okay. Good night.